Iran Daily Briefing. Friday, May 8, 2026. U.S. Navy destroyers transited the Strait of Hormuz under fire Thursday. Iran's military headquarters says the U.S. struck 2 Iranian vessels during that transit. Both governments say a ceasefire is still in effect. That contradiction, active fire exchanges alongside mutual declarations that the ceasefire holds, is where today's episode begins and where it keeps returning. Stay with us. A quick note before we begin. The core sourcing for today's episode on the ceasefire status, the Strait Exchange, and Iran's military statements carries meaningful uncertainty. The confidence levels on these items are materially limited, with most drawn from single sources in the low to mid 60% range. That is the honest picture we have right now. Report as higher confidence corroboration comes in, and we will update. Here is where things stand as of Friday, May 8th. As we have covered over the past several days, the Strait of Hormuz has been the central flashpoint of this conflict, a choke point that is now closed to normal commercial traffic. Al Jazeera reports approximately 20,000 seafarers are stranded in the Gulf. Separately, the chief of the UN's International Maritime Organization, speaking in Panama on Thursday, cited approximately 1,500 ships and their crews trapped there. These figures measure different things, individuals versus vessels, and should not be aggregated. Today's episode covers 5 threads: the Strait Exchange and what both sides are saying about it, Tehran's cost of living crisis, new U.S. sanctions targeting Iraq's deputy oil minister, a tanker that made it through the strait, and the movement of a French carrier group. One tracking note before we go further. Yesterday we followed the Aragchi in Beijing track. Today's available intelligence provides no update on that story. We will flag any development when it comes in. The Strait Exchange and the ceasefire that both sides say is still in effect. Let's start with what we know and be clear about what we don't. According to NPR, the U.S. military says it intercepted Iranian attacks on 3 U.S. Navy ships in the Strait of Hormuz. That exchange took place on Thursday as the destroyers transited the strait, according to U.S. Central Command. NPR also reports the U.S. military said it struck back at military targets in the strait. France 24 separately reports a further exchange of fire late Thursday night. President Trump addressed it directly. Al Jazeera reports that Trump stated the ceasefire with Iran is still in effect, despite those clashes. He also warned Iran to, in his words, sign agreement fast. Iran's account is different in the details. The spokesperson for Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya central headquarters, that is Iran's top military command, accused the U.S. of violating the ceasefire. According to Al-Monitor and Middle East Monitor, the headquarters says the U.S. targeted an Iranian oil tanker traveling from Iran's coastal waters near Jask toward the Strait of Hormuz. The same spokesperson, citing Al-Monitor alone, said U.S. forces also targeted another vessel entering the strait near the Emirati port of Fujairah. France 24 separately reports that Tehran described its actions as retaliatory following the U.S. strikes. That is the picture as of this morning. The U.S. says it intercepted Iranian attacks and struck military targets. Iran says the U.S. fired first and struck civilian and commercial vessels. Trump says the ceasefire holds. Iran's military headquarters says the U.S. violated it. Both accounts cannot be fully reconciled with each other. We are not going to tell you which to believe. We are going to tell you to hold both. On the vessel now in Dubai, as we covered yesterday under Track 3, the HMM Namu, a Korean-operated vessel was involved in the Strait of Hormuz incident. According to Al-Monitor, the only source reporting this detail, investigators boarded the vessel at approximately 600 GMT on May 8th at a port in Dubai. Today's intel item refers to a Korean-operated vessel towed to Dubai. If this is the same vessel we tracked yesterday as the HMM Namu, we should say so explicitly. Today's reporting is consistent with that vessel, but no source today makes that identification by name. If it is a different vessel, today's intel provides no update on the HMM Hormuz status. We are flagging that uncertainty rather than papering over it. France 24 reports that France is moving its aircraft carrier group toward the Strait of Hormuz. No explanation for that movement appears in today's available reporting. NPR reports that Iran is experiencing an internet blackout, with 99% of the population offline, described as the longest internet blackout ever recorded. What to watch? Both governments are publicly maintaining the ceasefire is in effect while describing active fire exchanges. Watch for any official statement that resolves that contradiction in either direction. Story 1. Tehran's cost of living crisis. Shifting from the strait to the streets of Tehran. France 24 reports that 2 months into the conflict, runaway inflation has produced a cost of living crisis in the Iranian capital. The piece notes that Iranians are coping and processing the war in different ways. One detail. France 24 highlights young Iranians have produced satirical Lego animations depicting US President Donald Trump as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's puppet and casting Iran as the defender of the oppressed. A sourcing note here. France 24 characterizes the current conflict as a US-Israeli offensive. That framing comes from a single source and may not reflect the full or agreed-upon characterization of the conflict. We are flagging it rather than adopting it. The animation detail is a small window into how ordinary Iranians are experiencing and narrating a war that has now, according to this reporting, stretched long enough to measurably affect the price of food and daily goods. The internet blackout reported by NPR, 99% of the population offline, adds another layer to that picture. What to watch? There is currently no second source corroboration on the scope of the economic impact. Watch for additional reporting on Tehran's domestic conditions from a second outlet. Story 2. Iraq's deputy oil minister sanctioned. The US State Department has announced sanctions on Ali Marie al-Bahadli, Iraq's deputy oil minister. Middle East Eye reports the accusation. The State Department says al-Bahadli abused his government position to divert Iraqi oil in support of what it describes as the Iranian regime and its proxies, and further accuses him of fraudulently mixing Iraqi and Iranian oil as part of a scheme to help Iran avoid sanctions. This announcement targets a serving official in a neighboring country and accuses him of facilitating Iranian sanctions evasion. The specifics: an active government minister, a named sanctions scheme, an allegation of oil blending are notable on their face. Listeners can draw their own conclusions about what this means for US-Iraq and US-Iran dynamics. We have one source on this, Middle East Eye, and no Iraqi government response in today's available reporting. What to watch? Watch for an Iraqi government statement on al-Bahadli's status, whether he contests the designation, resigns, or remains in post. Story 3. A tanker gets through. Middle East Eye reports that a Malta-flagged oil tanker named Odessa, carrying approximately 1 million barrels of crude oil, arrived in South Korea after passing through the Strait of Hormuz. That is the fact as reported. One vessel, one cargo, one arrival. What to watch? Watch for confirmation of whether the Odessa's passage involved any escort, incident, or official coordination, none of which appears in today's available reporting. Story 4. Pakistan Railway Talks. A quieter diplomatic note: Iran's ambassador to Islamabad, Reza Amiri Moghadam, met with Pakistan's Minister for Railways Hanif Abbasi to discuss enhancing bilateral railway cooperation. This is reported by both Mehr News Agency and IRNA. As we covered in yesterday's episode, the Pakistan channel has been active as a conduit for US-Iran communications. Today's railway meeting is a separate track: bilateral infrastructure diplomacy between Tehran and Islamabad. but it confirms the broader relationship remains operationally engaged. What to watch? Yesterday's look ahead flagged Iran's response to the US proposal delivered through Pakistan as an open question. Today's intel provides no update on that. We continue to watch. We opened today's episode with a contradiction: active fire in the Strait and simultaneous declarations by both sides that a ceasefire is in effect. Here is the fuller picture, assembled from what today's reporting provides. US Central Command says American destroyers transited the strait on Thursday and were attacked. The US says it intercepted those attacks and struck back at military targets. Iran's Qatam al-Anbiya headquarters says the US was the aggressor, that US forces struck an Iranian oil tanker near Jask and a second vessel near Fujairah. Tehran says its forces responded. Trump says the ceasefire holds and told Iran to sign an agreement quickly. A Korean-operated vessel towed to Dubai is now being examined by investigators. France 24 says France is moving a carrier group toward the strait with no stated reason in available reporting. That is the complete picture available in today's intelligence. The core contradiction remains unresolved. 3 things to watch in the next 24 to 48 hours. 1. The ceasefire watch. Both governments are publicly maintaining the ceasefire is in effect while describing active fire exchanges. Watch for any official statement that resolves that contradiction in either direction, from Washington, from Tehran, or from US Central Command. 2. The Dubai vessel investigation. According to Al Monitor, the only source reporting this, South Korean investigators boarded the Korean-operated vessel in Dubai at approximately 600 GMT today. Watch for any official findings or statements from South Korean authorities or the vessel's operators, and watch for any reporting that confirms or denies whether this vessel is the HMM Namu we tracked yesterday. 3. The Iraq sanctions response. The US State Department has named Iraq's deputy oil minister in a sanctions designation. Watch for a response from Baghdad. Whether al-Bahadli contests the designation, the Iraqi government issues a statement, or the designation passes in silence. Standing tracks with no new movement today. The Aragchi in Beijing track. Today's available intelligence provides no update. We continue to monitor. The Pakistan channel. Iran's response to the US proposal, no update in today's reporting. The Narges Mohammadi situation, no new development in today's available intel. Today's episode covered the Strait of Hormuz exchange and the contested ceasefire, Tehran's cost of living crisis and the internet blackout, new US sanctions targeting Iraq's deputy oil minister, the arrival of the tanker Odessa in South Korea, the movement of a French carrier group, and the ongoing investigation into the Korean-operated vessel in Dubai. We will be back tomorrow with any developments that move these stories. For full written briefs and source-backed updates, check out the Iran Brief on Substack. Paid members can build multi-country monitoring across the countries they care about, with personalized briefings delivered automatically.